Hello everyone, I'm Rebecca and welcome back to my sewing room. I am going to be doing something that is probably really foolish, and that is I am going to attempt to make a whole big new cosplay with embroidery that I have to digitize before Comic-Con. It's February 11th, Comic-Con is March 6th. Oh yeah, did I mention I'm in rehearsals for a show right now too that opens the weekend after Comic-Con? So I don't know how feasible this is, to be perfectly honest, but I am going to give it the old college try and see if I can actually get this Snow White cosplay done in time for Emerald City Comicon. Now I should say that this cosplay is not going to be like done, because frankly, I have no intention of doing the embroidery on the skirt before this year's Emerald City Comicon. So that is something that is going to come later. And in fact, the skirt may come later. And why is that, you ask? It's because this is the outfit that I'm recreating here. So this is a D23 Snow White doll from, I think, 2017. I sadly do not have her in my possession because she originally sold for a few $100s and now sells for a lot more than that. So we are doing this all based off of the amazing pictures that can be found on Flickr. And I am going to link those pictures down below so that you can see the original person who posted them there and see all of these really fantastic close-up pictures. But I knew that I wanted to make a Snow White cosplay, and when I saw the pictures on Pinterest, I decided this was going to be the one, even if I can't have the doll in my possession. And I have already started on her a little bit, meaning that I have started to digitize the embroideries. Because although I'm not going to do the skirt embroideries until later, because the skirt is a really large piece of fabric that even if you're doing machine embroideries on, you can do on a finished skirt because you can open it up so flat. The bodice embroideries, unfortunately, do have to be done before the bodice is assembled. So I first went through and I looked at these close-up pictures and said, okay, what would the approximate scale be on me? Now, I did not do exact scale like I do sometimes with my doll cosplays. I just kind of eyeballed and said, okay, if the sleeve strap is that big on the doll, it should be this big on me. And I kind of went through and did that for all of the pieces that need to be embroidered on so that I could start digitizing the embroidery using my brother PE Design embroidery software. So I have been digitizing all of that out pot by pot. I'll show you a little bit of how that works. At this point, I have already kind of laid down, I think, all of my basics for my embroidery, and I am tweaking each little point within it to make things nicer. I'll explain more of that when I show you the embroideries. But let's talk about the fabrics that I'm doing first. So this is a matte satin, poly matte satin, and this is going to be the bodice fabric. This is from the LA Fabric District, but you can find similar matte satin really anywhere. And then for the kind of like inner sleeves and also for the cape, I am using this silk du peony. This is also from the Fabric District. I think I got this one at Memo Fabrics, which is my favorite go-to, but I don't want to 100% swear to it. I've had this one actually for a little while now, and then realized I could use it for this, so this one has been in my stash. And then if you watched my recent video on my trip to the LA Fabric District, I got the skirt fabric there. And this is also a polyester, and it's like a nice kind of heavy satin. It does, if I remember correctly, have a little bit of stretch to it, but that should not be a problem or cause any issues for this skirt. This is the embroidery thread that I am most likely using. This was already in my stash. It's a Floriani embroidery thread, and I'm using it because it's a perfect match to this. Now I'm going to test this out. If I don't like it, I may acquire a gold metallic embroidery thread because technically I think her bodice is embroidered with a metallic, but I like the idea of having this match the skirt. So we'll have to play around with that. I don't currently have a metallic gold in my possession. And I'm going to be creating all of my own patterns for this. this because this bodice has a really interesting cut to it, and I don't have anything like that pattern-wise in my collection, so I'm gonna have to do a lot of tweaking and just figure out how that goes. But I'm focusing on the embroideries first, and then once I have perfected the embroideries, then I'm going to start moving on to like the bodice mock-up and everything. So hopefully we'll get all of that within this video because again, we are on a very tight timeline. Now, one thing that can help to slightly maybe alleviate this timeline somewhat is the fact that I actually have a yellow Snow White skirt already, like a floor length big ball gown skirt. I made this Snow White costume years ago, like probably a decade ago at this point, and it was based on the designer Disney Snow White doll. Now this is not the right shade of yellow, but if all else fails, since there isn't actually yellow otherwise in this costume besides like the embroidery, I'm sure that I could get away with using this skirt for this year's Comic-Con and then make my actual skirt for next year's Comic-Con, because the idea is that if everything kind of works out well enough for this and I'm happy enough with this cosplay, I may enter this into competition next year. But since the deadline for competition is probably already passed, obviously that was not going to happen for this year. The other thing that I am intending to do with the actual skirt is to then use that same skirt, even though it was like a ball gown shape, to use it as the skirt for a Snow White robe a la Francaise that I'm going to be making later this year in order to go to Rose City Comicon. That is my plan, at least. So hopefully that works out okay, because I think it should, since the sides of the skirt will be covered up by like the actual dress robe and we won't be able to see that they are designed to go over an evenly hemmed thing instead of like Grand Peignet. But again, that's going to be later down the line. We're just going to try and get this one wearable now. So let me go show you the embroidery so far and kind of how I plot that embroidery, and then we're going to put it over onto the embroidery machine and see how well it stitches out. So first off, this is my setup. I have here on my phone a picture of the bodice, and I will zoom in as far as I can to see the most detail on the bodice. Luckily, again, these are pretty detailed pictures, so I'm able to zoom in pretty close and see individual stitches. Then over here, we have the laptop with Brother PE Design going. I will show you on the actual computer how I plot these. And then over here, of course, we have the all-important Cookie, who insists on sharing with the laptop / I have to make sure that he doesn't actually stand on the laptop. So, okay, let me show you how I plot these and what I'm doing to then change what I've already plotted. Because right now what you're looking at is like some of the section has been cleaned up and some of it looks like crap because it's what I first laid down. So in order to plot something out, I go over to this line region area over here, drop this down, and there's two different tools that I can select. I can do the closed curve region tool or the pencil closed curve. And this design is a mixture of these because sometimes neither of them want to work. But let's try a closed curve region tool. I'm just going to kind of show you what that looks like and then delete it and show you how to manipulate it. So once we select the region tool, we want to go over here, get rid of the exterior. My PE design normally is set to just do satin stitch with no exterior outline. That is what I prefer for something like this, but these are where you choose those settings, and then we can go ahead and plot point by point. So like if we want to do a spiral, let's say, we can plot our spiral just because there's a lot of spirals in this design. And we just keep clicking and plotting a few points, single click, until we get to where we want to end it. And then we come back and double click and it fills it in for us. Now I didn't select the color here, so this one just did black. But if you come over to color, while you have selected this item, you can change the color. So if I wanted it to match everything else, I would select gold. And then also you can have it change the direction of the stitch. So under the sewing attributes menu, Over here, right now you can see that the direction is constant. So all the way through here, we're getting the same diagonal of stitch, but for a spiral, it generally looks better to have variable. And so now it's going to kind of vary across the spiral all the way around. So that's generally what I prefer for something like this. Now, if we want to go in and tweak this in our selection tool, we can come over here and select point instead of select the object. I like to zoom in a little bit for this. And then we can select one of these points and we can pull this around. If the angle isn't quite right, you can select one of these points and that will change the angle. But frankly, I think ours is pretty nice right now. Maybe we want to smooth this bit out over here though, make this a nicer spiral. And I don't love that, so I can move that over. And you know what? I want to add another point in. So I just click. And that way I can pull this point in and make that a little bit steeper. And you can do that kind of just wherever you want. You could add another point. This one turned out a little weird because its side points are strange. No, it doesn't. A lot of times at the start, you're going to find 2 points pretty close to each other. And generally speaking, I would actually say to delete one of those points. And it's going to give you a little bit more room to play with there. But you just move any of these around until you like the shape. And then it will show up also in your stitch order over here on this side. So right now, this should be the last item that we're stitching, but if you don't like that order, you can move that around, just pick and drag to a different order. So the other option, as opposed to doing this, what I wound up doing with some of this was to go in and select the draw with a pencil. I personally find that this doesn't work great for me because I'm using a touchpad on my laptop, but with this pencil, I can literally just click once and draw the shape that I want. I think this would probably work really great if you had a touch screen and like an actual pencil to draw with. But you can draw it and then release. And same sort of thing, it will just fill that in. So for me, this wound up creating a much less smooth shape than this. We only needed to tweak a little bit here, though I'd probably continue to tweak this side over here just to make it a little nicer. But same sort of thing, we can go in with the selection. Usually with drawing, it's going to give you a lot more points, and we could go in and modify or even remove a lot of these points. And if you select control click, you can select multiple points at once so that you can get rid of multiple points at once. And that is really all it is. I'm looking at my little design and I'm drawing these in, and then I'm going in and I'm tweaking them. So now I'm going to go over after I delete those spirals and I'm going to tweak like this shape that I drew in here that looks so awful and fix that up to what it's actually supposed to be. And same with this weird loopy spiral. And that is how you digitize using Brother PE Design. Then you would save this and put it on USB and stick that USB into the machine. So all the digitizing is now cleaned up, and I have come over here to my machine to just put them all together into one stitch out so that I can test them. However, I have already found that there is an issue. This one right here, it's like crooked kind of. So basically this little stem here shouldn't be quite as curvy, and that would make the flower sit more to the right because the flowers should be aligned, and the flowers should be aligned even when the little tail of this spiral is actually touching kind of more towards the center of this flower. So I tried rotating it to see if that would fix it. It's not, because it's kind of needing to go in multiple directions at once. So I just need to kind of like flatten out this design a little bit and straighten it up a little bit more. And then we should be good to go for that to line up like a strap. There we go. That looks better. So basically I tweaked almost the direction of everything. I did the long one, I straightened that out. I moved the flower part over a little bit more. I kind of straightened this part out a little bit more and moved it a little over, and same with the bottom. So that straightens it up. And the reason that I put the grid on here, don't normally do the grid, but that way I could make sure that they're fully aligned and that they look right together. So we've got, this is kind of the strap motif together, though they are also used on the front of the bodice, the upper part of the bodice, which is why they need to be separate. And then this is kind of the center bodice motif. So let's go ahead, hoop up some fabric and stitch those out. So I have some blue matte satin and tearaway stabilizer in the hoop here. This is a different matte satin than what I'm actually using for the project, but I don't have enough of that to just like burn through for tests. However, this will give me a good idea on if this pattern is even good at embroidering on matte satin, though this one is a little bit lighter weight. So I've got a new needle on there. I've got it all threaded up, bobbin thread in the bottom. And something that I like to do before I start doing an embroidery is I like to put a basting stitch around the entire outside. And so I do that, and actually I can move this basting stitch. I've got a little room in this hoop. This is going to do a stitch all the way around the designs, but I can adjust that so that it's a little bit wider from the designs. Sometimes if your design takes up almost the entire hoop, it's good to have actually a smaller, like tighter basting stitch. I don't need it to be that tight. So over here with embroidery basting distance, I can just kind of up that a little bit, 2 millimeters away. That should be good. Gives me a little bit more breathing room there, and we're good to go. I always like to save whatever I'm stitching on in my memory because I did actually increase the size of this flower just a little bit so that it would be the exact same width as the bottom flower. And also this remembers the placement. That way, just in case your machine shuts off midway through, it is stored in the memory. I usually wind up doing it on the machine, but I will probably have to delete, an existing design. Okay, so now we are good to go. So that is my basting stitch. I am not going to show you this entire stitch out because you would be bored, and also that would mean I would have to sit here the entire time. And while I do like to babysit a brand new stitch out, I am not going to be holding a camera over it the entire time. So I'll show you little clips of it as it goes. Here we go. I'm also not using the exact color thread I'm going to be using because I don't want to use it all up, so I'm using a different shade of gold. Also, the total stitch out time for this, I have this on like a medium speed. It's 36 minutes and it is 12,945 stitches. That's for these 3 patterns combined. Little check-in here. We're about halfway through this first large bodice front motif. It looks really nice, like it's nice and smooth. I was a little bit worried about just how wide some of these stitches are, but they do feel very smooth and my fingers are pretty rough, so that seems like hopefully a good sign. So at a certain point, my machine must note that a satin stitch is too wide because it just stitched out the middle of the flower and it was actually at the widest point making like 2 stitches across. They don't look like 2 stitches across, but I was watching the machine and it did do that. So yeah, we've finished all of the gold from the first motif. I'm gonna come back and do the red flowers and I'm letting it do the 2 smaller motifs first. It has just finished motif number 2. I don't love this little like flub that happened right here. I don't think that has anything to do with my digitization. I think that was an issue in the actual stitching, and it was one of the last things it did in this motif. I don't know if maybe it got caught while it was coming over here. Oh, in fact, we're having issues right now. So you can hear on a machine when it's having issues. This jump stitch did not cut right here. Sorry, I know we're trying to get really close in here, but this jump stitch that was supposed to have cut at the bottom of this did not. So we've got a weird thread, and then it wasn't holding the stitches at first down there because this didn't cut. So I am going to trim that. I think we should be able to just move on since this is an underlaying stitch. It did create kind of a bobble right here at the bottom of that as it was pulling the stitches, but it shouldn't be a big deal, especially since this is a test. So the gold part of the stitch out is just about done at this point. We've got one more little loopy that it's starting on right now, but I feel like it's looking very flat. Granted, we're looking at this under the light of the machine, but when we look at like the Snow White, I feel like hers almost comes off as metallic. I don't know that it is metallic, but it makes me tempted to either try this in a metallic, which means I would need to get metallic, or the other thing that this kind of looks like, I hope you can see this well enough. I'll pop a picture up on screen as well, just to make it better. But it almost looks like it's variegated, like two different shades of gold coming together. I don't know if a thread like that exists, but it would be really interesting to see the difference with this stitch out, because I do feel like I got the design pretty much on. Like if we look at the difference there, it's pretty close, and I'm happy with that. Again, we're looking at, this is the straps and then this is the bodice front. The one thing maybe is that I almost wonder if the bodice front ought to be wider. I have not yet mocked up the bodice, but that was kind of how I did scale math in my head of how wide I thought it should be. But that may need to be increased once I actually have the pattern. But I feel like the straps look really nice too. I mean, when we compare them, again, it's almost like this is just rougher. Like I almost made it too smooth, but I do think it looks really nice. All right, the full stitch out is done. I think my biggest complaint, again, is that it just feels a little bit flat, color-wise. I mean, possibly texture-wise as well. I mean, it did a really nice job with all the satin stitching, but it does just feel a little bit flat. As far as the actual pattern goes, this is really my only qualm right here. It was like it missed a stitch. I'm not sure why that happened, but that should have been continuous. I think it was because although this is all the same pattern, it looks like it did all of this and then came back and did that. I'm pretty sure that was all the same pattern anyway. I'll double check that that's not something I butted up next to it, but I think that was all in one. The rest of it honestly looks pretty good. I mean, we did have the little fumble flaw right there. Also, it made another of those bad sounds right over here. It was right after it pulled up those bobbin stitches. That's what you're seeing, this little bit of white right here. Those are bobbin stitches that it pulled up. And then this is the thread that got caught underneath from where we had that issue that I showed you before. But otherwise pretty good. I am seeing a weird stitch right here, come to think of it. I don't know what that's about, because there should not have been some sort of outlying stitch. It's not a big deal, but it's a little bit weird. This pattern is meant to have the gap there. I don't know that I like that gap. I might shove that over a little closer just because I feel like it looks a little bit strange. And then the biggest thing will be the question mark of, is this the actual size that I want on the bodice front? It looks small visually. I don't know if it will be small, but I think we're going to save doing another stitch out until we actually have the mock-up done. I guess the one other place, this is what I was talking about before, where it laid down 2 stitches across, and I feel like you can kind of see the difference now that we're looking at it more in the light. Hopefully you can see that, where kind of one stitch goes and then overlaps with the other stitch. But overall, honestly, again, I feel like this totally does represent. I'm tempted to get some metallic gold, try with the metallic gold. I looked online, I couldn't find a variegated, like, darker, lighter gold, so that's not really an option, but I might try metallic gold and see if that kind of solves our flat texture issue. Okay, I knew I had gold metallic thread because I knew that I had a twin to the silver, but for some reason it had fallen off my little like wall setup thread spool holder. So I do have gold metallic. However, it's really not the shade of gold that I wanted to use. I wanted something brighter, more like the yellow that I was going to use, or even more like what I just tested out, which is this one. So again, this middle one is what I'm planning to use, or if I don't do metallic. This one that I just dropped, this one right here is what I just used for the stitch out. This is the gold that I have. So it's a much more like antique gold, not as much of a yellow gold. I could get a yellow gold. It's not going to be the same quality as this because I'm pretty sure this is a nicer quality, and I don't know where to get this. This is Yenmet brand. I don't know where to get this. I got this when I worked at Quality Sewing, so it was something that they must have sold at the time. But frankly, their prices are really high and they don't have a location super near me anymore. So I'm looking online like Amazon for what I can get. I have found like these guys right here. I don't know the quality. I don't know if they're any good, but they can get here tomorrow. You just have to buy this many of them, which is ridiculous. So I think I might go ahead, place that order and see, because this is just a much brighter looking gold than this one. So I've decided while I still have room in this hoop, I might as well do another stitch out with the metallic gold thread that I already had on hand, just to see what it looks like, if it makes it look like sort of any more rough hewn, if you will. So I'm just doing the smallest motif, this same motif. I've just turned it up on its end up there, and we're just going to see what a metallic version will look like, even though this is not the thread that I would actually use. Okay, I actually paused it just after that last clip because I realized that it is pulling up the bobbin thread. I don't know if you can even see that, but there's a lot of white, like half of this is white, not actually metallic, and it looked like the same thing was happening over here. This one seemed to stitch fine, but these other ones are not great. So I'm going to change my tension and see if I can loosen the tension on the top will be the answer so that I don't pull up the bottom. Okay, to my naked eye, you can really see the difference. This is before I changed tension. This is after I only decreased it by 1. This is all gold. This is actually all white. So, or almost all white. So I don't know what happened in the middle there where it looks kind of gappy, but maybe that is kind of how I will get it to look a little bit more like the doll. So I am now truly wondering if what I was seeing on the doll is the bobbin thread coming up and making it look variegated. I feel like the camera is not picking up the difference between the metallic and the bobbin thread here, but significant portions of this are bobbin thread. I reduced the tension where I told you here. I reduced it again somewhere here-ish, I think. And there's still like, this is all gold. This is all gold. This is all gold. That's all gold. The rest of this is completely mixed with a heavy emphasis on the white coming up being the bobbin thread, not actually gold. And also the thread broke at least 4, if not 5 times, and I had to start it. The other weird thing is that it has like shrunk in the stitches so that they are inside of the underlying stitches. I don't know how that even happens, but those are the underlying stitches. And then somehow they stitched this way. So, I mean, like if we look over here, I guess you can kind of see an underlying stitch right on the edge there. I don't know why that happened either, but it's a little bit closer in. And like this one, we don't see the underlying stitch, but here we definitely do. So yeah, this is just ugly. Yes, it looks rougher hewn, but frankly from here I feel like it looks white. Now granted, this was not the right color of gold anyway. It was not the yellow gold. It was just what I had on hand, but it does not look good. If I had to choose between this and this, I would definitely choose this, plus it didn't break any threads. So the threads from Amazon just arrived. They look like this. They are the Sim Thread brand. And so I did a stitch out with those. And I used the instructions that came with the thread, which said, drop your tension down to 1. My tension doesn't work that way. It goes like -1, -2, -3, etc. I wound up finishing it at a -7. That was over here. I started, I think, at a -3 over here. Like that part looks beautiful. And then it got funky. So every time it got funky, I dropped the tension lower. And I don't know that it really made much of a difference. Also, I feel like it honestly doesn't look that much more sparkly than the regular gold thread and required a lot of babysitting. It could not cut off to do jump stitches. I think it managed to successfully cut off one time, and otherwise it was like pulling and trying to go to the next one. You might notice also that the like initial stitch out still wound up outside over here and in some other, these might have just been tails actually, because I kept having to pull the tails longer that just got caught underneath. So yeah, with all that babysitting, I don't know if that is really worth the difference, because I feel like it doesn't look that much difference. Obviously it looks a lot better than that one, both for color and for quality. I do have 2 other threads I can test with, which are these 2. Obviously, this is silver, not gold, but I've been seeing this like textured thread online. Now, I don't know how well this runs through a machine, and I don't know the tricks. So I'm going to like do maybe a part of a stitch out with this. And the other part, I'm going to use this thread that I have had in my stash and have never used. It looks like plastic, honestly. I don't know how well this runs through the machine either. This camera is having a really hard time focusing on the sparkles, so I can't even show you like what the tail end of the thread looks like, but it's interesting. It might look really cool or it might look garbage. So I kind of think I'm going to do one more small motif with like half and half of these, and we'll see what they look like. Okay, so thread 2, not gonna happen. I couldn't actually get it threaded other than using like a little hand sewing needle threader. And then once I did get it threaded, this was what happened after literally 2 stitches. So this is clearly not meant to be in a sewing machine. I think maybe it's hand sewing thread, or possibly it might require a top stitch needle, which I don't own. I've been using a metallic needle for these threads. Actually, I have to admit, for the first test that I did yesterday, that was an embroidery needle. I didn't put on a metallic, but for this one and also for this, that was a metallic needle. I am going to go ahead and do the rest of the motif using the hollow sparkly, hollow shimmer sulky thread and see how it does. It did already break the thread once in this stitch, and I don't know if you can tell, but we've got some of the outlying stitch showing or underlying stitch. Now it's outlying, and we also have a little bit of bobbin pulling up, and I am on the lowest tension. -8 is the lowest tension on my machine, but I'm going to try the rest of it and see how it goes. I like the shimmeriness of it. It's very cool, but I'm not sure it's going to work. Well, crap. I kind of love it. Like, I don't think the camera is picking up the texture of it. It is far more textured than even this metallic gold. As I was saying, this metallic gold really only reads just a little bit more sparkly than the flat regular like thread. This, it has body and it has dimension. And it looks really cool. And yes, it doesn't quite meet these underlying stitches there and there. Yes, it did pop a thread here or break a thread here. It did not break a thread the rest of the time. You can see barely any bobbin thread coming up. Like there's a couple bobbin threads maybe pulling up there and right at the end there and right here. But honestly, it's like not enough to, I don't know, look bad, I feel like. And it looks really cool. And the problem is Amazon doesn't sell this, so I can't get it quickly unless Quality Sewing has it in stock. I only have one spool. That is not enough to do everything that I need to do. And shipping from Sulky takes 10 to 14 days. Not going to work. That's like how much time I have. So I'm going to call Quality Sewing, see if I can get some more spools of this. Like if they have it in stock and I can just go get it when I run out, awesome. Because it honestly looks really cool. So as I feared, Quality Sewing does not have it. And just for good measure, I even called the 2 quilt stores that are nearest to me to see if they carried this specific thread. One of them carries no embroidery thread whatsoever, and the other one carries some, I guess, but not this. So I did find one place that could get it to me by next Saturday. That's a week from today. Oddly enough, it's an online fly fishing store, but apparently this holographic thread must be used in fly fishing, which is interesting. So I could place that order. The downside is I don't know how many spools of this I need. First off, I don't know how much is left on this spool. This spool has 250 yards. It could be that this spool has enough to do this entire project. I find that unlikely because I feel like 250 yards is not very much. And also this is not a completely full spool. So I do find that unlikely. I have a feeling that there may be enough on here to do the bodice fronts. If that is the case, then that would mean that I would have the time allowed, because I don't see myself getting to the sleeves, basically, like putting in the sleeves. I don't see that happening in the next week. So I would have the time allowed to get those spools from the fly fishing site. But then the question would be, again, how many do I need? The spools are only like $4.50, but the shipping is like $5. So like I would rather get, you know, 2 or something if that's what I need. But it's a complete guess because I literally have no idea how much of this I will need. Frankly, if I use the same thread for the embroidery on the skirt, when that eventually comes to it, I'm gonna need oodles of this, and it almost makes me tempted to get like multiple spools, like 3 or 4 spools. But I don't know how much I'll need for this, and so it's kind of taking a gamble because I could wind up with a whole bunch of spools of this that I just do not need. But I think I'm gonna take that chance, and I think I'm gonna take the chance that I have enough to do the front of the bodices here. because God forbid I wind up starting a stitch out and midway through I run out of thread and don't have more to replace it. Like, that would be the worst. Yes, I do save it in the memory of my machine, so I could potentially get back to it as long as like nothing in the hoop gets bumped, etc. But I'm gonna see if this camera can just show you the difference in the hollow versus everything else. I feel like you can see the depth better on this camera, maybe because of the lighting. So again, flat, no metallic. Really bad metallic from yesterday. Metallic that was from Amazon, which is nice, but this one, again, just so much more depth. I don't know if that's coming across. Let me know in the comments if that comes across. But I think I'm going to order from a fly fishing site and get myself some embroidery thread, because why not? So I posted a poll on Instagram with the like 3 types of embroidery thread that I've used, with the hollow shimmer, regular metallic, and the regular Floriani, just to see what other people's views are of those 3, because I was really liking the hollow shimmer, and I did mention that within the poll that that was where I was leaning towards. But all of you disagree. Not all of you, but a lot of you disagree. It was something like 40% to like 30% to 30% on my story, where I also showed the original like doll embroidery. And then on my post, where I did not show the doll embroidery, it was like 80% versus like 10%, 10% or something like that. And the winner was Floriani, regular Floriani. So, I mean, I am still torn on that. But part of me knows that it's a sensible thing to do, because it also dawned on me that I stitched this out as like a really small size motif. We already know that when I stitched this one out, I had increased that size. I did not do that for either of these. This is the original size. So first off, it's already narrower and smaller. Secondly, this design doesn't have any of the really, really wide stitching that these designs have that would be even more likely to trip up the hollow shimmer. So, you know, somewhere like this where it's really, really wide, or somewhere like this before it starts going into the 2 stitches across and it's really, really wide, that I feel like would probably cause an issue for the hollow shimmer. Part of me is still tempted to actually test out like the larger designs in the hollow shimmer and see how they do. But the other part of me knows that I should probably just use the Floriani and follow all of your guys' advice. And yeah, and also the fact that I already have it and I don't have to go online to buy more of it. So in any case, we are putting the embroidery aside for a little bit here, and we are going to attempt to do a bodice mock-up. Now, I have no patterns remotely like this bodice with that sort of strap under the bust and then like the filled in bust area, but I do have like a pointed ball gown bodice that laces up the back, and that is actually the ball gown bodice that I did for this one right here, this Victorian one. So I'm going to kind of start with that and then change a whole lot of things, because I don't want darts. And I think that because it's going to stop under the bust, I can get away with removing the darts. So we're gonna kind of alter the darts out. And then I am also actually going to take what was originally this simplicity pattern right here, and I had turned this into my Anna Frozen Fever bodice, which has sort of the same strap shape as what then becomes the underbust strap. So I'm going to kind of combine those together and make something else up, and that is going to be my mock-up. So let's go figure out how to do that. So this is the bodice front pattern from the Victorian bodice. Sorry about the light coming in from the window. And it was already sewn together with the darts from the last time that I used this as a mock-up last year. And what I've kind of done on here is I've drawn in my new lines. So I've drawn in, this is the like fill-in bust area with the white. This is that curved piece. And this is going to curve up into the strap. The strap is more angled, so I will be angling this more, but I haven't really quite figured out that part yet. And then I've also been trying to figure out like, okay, well then what happens for the rest of this? Because this should become the entire strap, which means it's going to need to be a lot wider. This is just kind of drawn in without any seam allowance, but by my estimate, it had been only about 2.25 inches wide going up. And I feel like this strap, I mean, it's significantly wider than that. That's probably like 4 inches or something like that. So I need to figure out what that kind of turns into angle wise and what happens to the arm side with that, because right now we are not meeting up. Obviously we've got this huge gap between this bit and the arm side, and I feel like this should connect around here with the arm side. So I'd figure that out. And then I also really want to get rid of these two darts. I am open to either a princess seam, one single princess seam, or one single dart that is farther over. I don't want a dart this close to the center because of the embroidery. So I want the embroidery to have like all this space and then a little extra space and then there be a seam. So I'm kind of just trying to figure out how to manipulate this. I may kind of destroy this part of the mock-up. I do have like an actual piece that's marked as a pattern piece that's all taken apart, but I may kind of just like cut into this to see if I can then get that to be flat and like create a new dart. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Okay, I feel like this may look very confusing, but I hope that I figured it out. So hopefully you can see these colors that I've done. You should be seeing 3 different colors. There's like an orangey color, a blue, and a pink. And the blue color is the outline, the 2¼ inch wide outline of the strip that goes and curves up here. And then the pink on the outside of that is including seam allowance, what that would look like. Then the orange is the top of where the seam allowance would be for the lower section here. And so I've done that basically 1/2 inch in from the blue, 1 inch in from the pink, so that we get 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now I have curved the arm's eye in a little bit further so that it tapers in to meet with the strap right here. So that is that new curve. This part's going to disappear. Likewise, this part right here is going to disappear because I realized actually that by the time we get to the shoulder, it's in the right place on my yellow ball gown. It's just this part down here that's not. So we need to open that up a little bit for that neckline, kind of square that off a little. We've got a line where it's going to go a little bit lower and then wider. This part will wind up being the white fill-in. I'm not exactly sure what I will be doing pattern-wise in that, but that's going to get cut away from the bodice pattern for now. And then I just kind of made a dart in between the two darts in a hope to pretty much flatten this out as much as possible. Right where the darts end, it does look bubbly, but I think it will do enough to flatten out. So yeah, now I just have to figure out how to actually cut this out in new pieces of fabric, but those are our pattern pieces that we're going to start with for this mock-up. So honestly, it's a lot closer than I thought it would be, which is really awesome. Obviously there are some fit issues going on here with this bodice. I have kind of put together the pieces as if it's going to have a front closure. It does not. It will have a back zipper, but this is much easier to fit. And in doing so, since I didn't want to like put this piece in 2 pieces, this is just sewn in over here and it's kind of flapped across and will need to be pinned in place. But I can't really pin that in place first because that's where the fit issues are. They're in the straps. Like the back is, it's just too long and the front is too long. So I need to tighten up the straps honestly really significantly and see if that fixes things there. Really, it's like the whole seam of the strap needs to be, I just need to cut off this extra part so this seam can be pretty much on the shoulder, because then I think that will fit pretty correctly. Looks like there is a little bit of extra room in the back. Oh, a lot of bit of extra room in the back as well. I think even once I take the length out, and there is extra room coming up in the center part of the bust that needs to be like squidged out. But the parts that I was worried about, as in like the fit of the, you know, U shape going on in the bust coming together with the bodice, that actually worked correctly. I think the point is too long, so we need to cut off some of the point. If anything, that makes it easier. But otherwise, the shape of that looks really nice. The fit overall through the waist looks really nice. It's a little bit large, like my seam allowance where I've pinned it is just a tiny, tiny bit large there. But yeah, easy fixes. I'm gonna take off all this excess and we'll see what that looks like. So I took it in everywhere, and the one thing that it did was now make the bodice a little bit too short. So I just need to lengthen from the bottom of the bodice. I knew already that I was going to add seam allowance to the bottom, but I think I'm actually going to add a little bit more, because when we look at Snow White's bodice, it does curve out from her hips just a tiny bit, like inch max. And so I want that to curve out. So I'm going to extend it probably 1.5 inches actually at this point, because right now it is right at my natural waist, and that is the raw edge of this. So the back doesn't need to go quite as far because my waist is up here. So I will only extend the back by, what is that, probably just the seam allowance. But I think here and also probably here, and then I might retract that because I like this line, and so therefore if I am lowering it here, I think I need to lower it here the same amount, which is kind of ironic because that's basically what I cut off of the point, but I like this shape of it. And at this point, everything else I think is actually fitting pretty great. I took the back in significantly. I took 2.5 inches out of the front strap here, and then I took a whole bunch out from both sides over here in the center front as well. And yeah, things are fitting really nicely. The one thing that I'm concerned about is that these straps are technically bias because the grain is here in the center, which means that by the time it goes out, it's kind of more like that shape because it's a big, like, wide U. And so I'm a little bit concerned about the potential for stretch there, particularly because they're going to be embroidered on. And so part of me is wondering if there is a way to cut it so that it isn't biased somehow on both sides, like with a lining or something like that. And I don't know that there is an answer to that. And I might just have to see, like, once I add the embroidery and like have the stabilizing in there, if that will just stabilize it enough. Also, I mean, it's not going to be just cotton. It's going to be matte satin, a fairly heavy matte satin, lined with something. I don't know yet. I mean, I might just line it with this, to be honest, but it is going to be lined. So it's going to be thicker, and I can have like stay stitching and stuff on there to try and stop the bias, but it does make me a little bit nervous, though I think the bias is also what's leading to it fitting really nicely through here. So, I mean, yeah, like, we have a bodice, which is great because that means that this project can actually continue. If I didn't get a working bodice tonight, this project was not going to be able to continue. It was going to have to get shelved, and I was going to have to do something else for ECCC. But since we have a working bodice, I can just cut out the actual matte satin a little bit longer in the waist and we're good. So that is freaking fantastic. And I'm really glad that this worked out so well because I'm out of time for sewing this week, and I got in basically exactly what I needed to, which was getting a successful bodice mock-up. So really, really fantastic. I will have to look at the sizing of this and see how well the embroidery fits on it and if that needs to be tweaked. But that is something that will happen in successive videos. So yeah, that's gonna be it for this video. I feel like we got a good amount accomplished with the digitizing and the stitch out and the bodice mock-up. I'm happy with it. So if you are happy with it, if you like this video, please go ahead and click the thumbs up icon. And if you'd like to see more videos like this from me, please go ahead and click subscribe and the little bell icon to be notified every time I post a new video. I do post videos here on YouTube at least once a week, usually with sewing vlogs like this out on Tuesdays, and sometimes with additional costuming or sewing related content out on Saturdays, but I post every day over on my Instagram, so please go follow me on Instagram. That's at Lady Rebecca Fashions. And if you'd like to help support all of the work that I do on this channel, I do have a link to my Patreon and my Ko-fi down in the description below, or you can send me a super thanks or join my YouTube channel memberships right here on YouTube below the video. I'd also like to give a special shout out to my Edwardian level patrons, Jean and Kim. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Happy sewing!